Hey everybody, it's Rob from Rob's Game Group here, and I have another video today. This one is, again, not my normal video style that I do, but this is a response video to a response video from Chris Gonnerman, the author of Basic Fantasy, about my original video that I did on my top 10 house rules for Basic Fantasy. And he had some questions about some things in my video, and there's a couple of things that I feel like maybe I didn't explain well, so I thought I'd make a follow-up video to try to explain more of what I meant. If you like these videos, please consider subscribing, hit the notification bell and the thumbs up. That helps our video circulate. You can contact me with questions on my videos like this at Rob's Game Group, all one word, on Facebook. So, first of all, I'd like to start out by saying that I appreciate the interaction that video got. I enjoyed thoroughly reading everybody's house rules that they use. I think it's interesting to see the way that we all basically take the same game and use it in different ways. So a couple of points that Chris and other people ask about, I'm going to discuss here. The first one being the moving through friendlies. And Chris is correct. It's not in the sense of a house rule breaking the core rules. It's not a house rule for Basic Fantasy because Basic Fantasy doesn't actually have those rules. But I still call it a house rule, and here's why I call it a house rule. Because I play a lot of games. I run a lot of games. And I have for many years. And not all of them, but some of them do have rules about moving through friendlies. And some of them are more restrictive than others. So as far as role-playing games go, because miniature games are a whole nother thing, but as far as role-playing games go, it's a house rule at my house, basically, that no matter what role-playing game we're playing, you can move through friendlies. So I kind of threw that in there. It's one of the ones that I do use, and I referred to it as Basic Fantasy because that's what I'm currently running the most of. Excuse me. But it's not breaking one of Basic Fantasy's actual rules. It's just how I do it because, I don't know, I just always have found it easier to handle like that instead of handling it because one game handles it this way, one game handles it this way. Well, we're just going to handle it this way in general. To the issue of milestones. A lot of people don't like milestones, which is a concept that I learned about through D&D. And to be honest, I'm not that crazy about it either. But it does make things simpler. And yes, I understand the design philosophy behind D&D or Basic Fantasy or other fantasy games. And where if you get down to the nitty gritty, it can change the power level a little bit by using milestones. However, I disagree with the thought that players being a certain age means they're just ready for the rules. I've run a lot of games over the years for both adults and kids, and not just my kids, other kids. I actually got paid. I got hired one time to run a D&D adventure birthday party. And that was kind of cool. But anyway, the thing about the kids is I don't agree with the idea of standardized testing. Each group of kids is different. I don't really do, and like I said in the video, I don't do this with the adult. With the adults, you've played most of them. Well, all of my friends have played enough that okay, you guys have different experience charts, and that's how follow your experience chart. With the kids, it varies from kid to kid. Sometimes the kids are ready for the full rules right out the gate, and sometimes they're ready for part of the rules, and you have to introduce other rules a little along as you go, and kind of handle it with kitten gloves to ease them into doing everything for the game. I did not intend for it to seem like I would only use Milestones for kids and that Milestones would be all they would ever see. It's how I start the game out, and after so far into the game, once they're picking up the books and they're learning to make their own characters and so on and so forth, I do introduce more of the rules and prepare them for playing the game the way the adults do. So it's kind of a 6 one, half a dozen the other. Look at it really falls to the game master, I feel, to look at the group that's playing and decide what their level of interaction needs to be. I am really sorry for the noise. Any of you who watch my videos, you know that is my dog. He is a little chihuahua who snores like a grown man, so he's really loud. I apologize for that. But anyway, getting back to it, I just, at the end of the day, I think the DM needs to determine based on the interaction level of the group of kids that is playing. That being said, I want to move them up further. And I don't do that with just Basic Fantasy. I do it with Savage Worlds too. If I'm teaching kids to play Savage Worlds, which in my opinion is a far more complicated game than Basic Fantasy, there are a lot of aspects of the game that I don't introduce in the beginning. Like, for one thing, in the beginning, I did the same thing I did with Basic Fantasy. I do pre-gen characters. I find out what kind of character they want to play, and I'll pre-gen their character to get them started. The further we go into campaigns and their characters possibly dying and so on and so forth, they learn to start making their own characters, and then they'll eventually learn how to use the experience charts. For me, it's a teaching process. But even like with Savage Worlds, I may not start off using hindrances. I may just give them one edge to start with instead of multiple edges, and let them. And there are certain rules for well, not really rules. There are certain guides in the GM book that they put out that Miss Jody Jody Black wrote a really good essay in there on gaming with children, and I actually took a lot of what I do with kids from that. So anyway, moving along, Chris, you asked about the save versus death. Well, like I said, I didn't want it to be just you hit 0 hit points and you're dead. I wanted there to be a chance. So of the options that were in the book, I liked save versus death the best. And to answer your question, yes. It has made my players very cautious, as dying at 0 hit points would as well. But they learned real fast, like in our first demo game that we did of this system, which they all loved, by the way. I went and bought the book that night. They learned very quickly, yeah, maybe we shouldn't just run into combat all willy-nilly, because even though I explained how dangerous and deadly old school role-playing could be, I think some of them still went into it with the mindset that this was D&D with the safety on, like 5th edition, and it's not. And I can tell you for a fact, Big Chris, my barbarian player, learned that real fast when in the demo game, his character was killed in the first round of combat and by zombies, and he immediately, just to keep him in the game, he had to come back and play his twin brother, who we left in town, and he just caught up with the group. And it makes them more cautious. They're in a process. They're in a castle right now that's filled with monsters, and they're very strategically slipping around through the castle and looking for stuff and avoiding big fights where they can, or thinking more tactically, and that's a good thing, I think. That makes for a more interesting experience. So moving on to the move and attack thing. Wow, this is a complicated one. because you did such a great extra video, like on your video, the rule you forgot thing. That was such a good video to watch. I enjoyed it very much. Anybody watching who hasn't checked it out, go check it out. I think maybe I didn't explain what I meant, because it doesn't seem like it came across the way I meant it. So I'm going to try to explain it better here without using, because I don't have a great camera set up for using miniatures like you do for your demos or your videos. So when I say move and attack or attack and move, what I mean is when their initiative comes up in battle, they can make their move and then attack, or they can attack and then make their move. They can't hold the move for later on or use the move and then attack later on. I do the attacking and moving on their initiative right then and there. I'm not talking about holding initiatives. I'm talking about just standard move and attack. I have run many role-playing games like that over the years, and I don't feel like that breaks the system to allow them to. Now, if they move out of combat with somebody, then they're going to get a parting shot to the back. They also learned that the hard way. So that was fun. Not for them. But again, that's really, at the end of the day, that comes down to GM discretion. What do you like? It doesn't, like I said, it doesn't really break the game one way or the other. Now, split movement, which I was really introduced to with 5th edition D&D, because they didn't used to do that, but they did it in 5th edition D&D, being I can move part of my move, then take an action, then move the rest of my move. Okay, me personally, I hate it. I don't hate it because it's more realistic, because it actually is. If you had the movement, you should be able to, like, I only have to move 1 square to get to this guy, so I have 5 movement that's wasted. Well, sorry. The way that it becomes complicated, in my opinion, is when I've got, I don't know, 10 monsters on the table, and then 6 players on the table, and by I mean miniatures. Obviously, I don't want all my players on my table. Some of them are kind of big and my table wouldn't survive it. But anyway, that's not the point. The point is, if I have 10 miniatures of bad guys and 6 miniatures of good guys, and they're in a big fight, and some of them are moving part of their movement, attacking, and then moving the rest of their movement, that's a very complicated situation. I'm not saying it can't be done and people don't play it that way, because 5th Ed is designed that way. But I don't like it. It's complicated. It's not too bad as a player, like you mentioned, to just keep up with your one thing. But if I'm having to keep up with what their players did and then how much of the movement of my guys was used, it can be very complicated. So I hate split movement and I don't use it. Like, you either, when your initiative is called, you either attack and then you can move, or you move and then you can attack. But you do it all together right then and there. So I don't know if that clears up anything or not. Either way, you're having fun running your games. I'm having fun running my games. At the end of the day, we both win. So holding actions, though, now that goes into the whiteboard thing. I love the picture you used in your video of the huge whiteboard on the wall. I actually want a huge whiteboard on my wall. My wife is not keen on me getting one because they're pretty expensive. But I actually just have a small whiteboard that I hand down the table and they use for initiative tracking. And it's magnetic. And I do have some of these little magnetic strips that are made for tracking initiative that I think Paizo put out with some of their game mastery stuff. And we've used those, so you write everybody's initiative on it, and then you can just move them around on the board. And but you know, we got lazy over time, and now we just have the dry erase marker and the eraser, and they write everything out, and then, you know, erase initiative numbers and change initiative numbers per turn. So holding an initiative, you are absolutely correct. If you're holding that initiative, like you've drawn down on somebody with your bow or your wand of fireballs or whatever, and you hold your initiative because you're trying to hold them at bay. So anybody, like if you go to high initiative and you want to hold to see what they do, anybody in my game who goes after you, you can interrupt just like you normally would when you're holding. Well, I'm holding for him to do that. If he does this, then I'm going to interrupt. So you hold. But where that can be complicated, and some game masters I've seen have a problem with it, is when it goes into the next round. And then some people will be like, well, if you held it for the whole round, then you just lost the action. I don't like that. So if you hold it for the whole round, when you go into the next round, that player who's still on hold doesn't roll initiative. They're still on hold waiting for a chance to use their action, and they can therefore interrupt at any point. So regardless of what the monsters may roll or whatever, if the monsters or bad guys try to do something on that second turn while they're still on hold, they can still interrupt and fire. So that way your ranged characters are still presenting a danger to the opponents during the combat. I may do a video where I actually use the whiteboard and show my tracking procedure and how we do it. It's not super complicated, but it may be something that other people want to see and use in their games. And that's cool if they do. If not, that's cool too. The other one that you mentioned that I failed to upset you, yeah, I'm taking that as a joke, because when I said that, it was intended as a joke. Because I had a couple of people comment on that one in particular about the clerics using edged weapons. I don't think anybody really cares. And anybody who does, that's fine, because they can just use it rules as written in their game. But it is a holdover from old school D&D. And I stand by the fact that I just feel like it makes no sense that I'm a cleric, so I can pick up a mace, but I can't pick up a sword. It just, I don't know. I've never liked the rule, so I don't use it. But no, I didn't expect anybody to actually get upset about that. And I'm going to, as an aside right here, this isn't specifically for Chris, this is for anybody. There are two ways to look at this. If you are upset about somebody's house rules, it is either because you are attempting to play in their game and you don't like the house rules they're using, in which case you can discuss this with the group, and if they still want to use those house rules that you don't like, you have the option to just leave the game. That's cool. If you're just reading somebody's house rules on the internet, and I didn't have this happen, so I'm not bringing it up because I'm just talking just to talk, basically, but I didn't have this happen. But if somebody was to get bent out of shape because they read that I used a house rule, or you used a house rule, or whatever, and they don't like it, they're not playing the game. Who cares? If you don't like somebody's house rule, nobody cares. Don't play in their game. Simple as that. I said it before, I'll say it again. The game master makes the decisions for their game, the game that they want to run. I have the benefit of playing with the same people for many, many years, having a large pool of gamer friends in the area that I live to pull from to put games together. And they're all very familiar with the way I run games, and I don't have a shortage of people showing up at the table to play because, I'm upfront about how I do it. But I don't know, it's just it's silly, the idea to me that somebody would get upset over somebody else's house rules. I don't know. We'll just leave it at that. It's neither here nor there anyway. They're house rules. But since you challenged me, Chris, on my rule about moving through friendlies, and you were technically right, but whatever. I'll scratch it as counting as a house rule. But that means I got to add in another one, or my video is not the top 10 house rules anymore. It's the top 9 house rules. And I can't go back and edit my photo. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add another house rule to replace it. Only I've actually already been using this. I just forgot to put it in the list, so And that is, again, it's an option in the book to use gold on a one-for-one basis for experience. And I really like that because I think that it makes the game more story driven. The players are more interested in seeking out treasure than they are necessarily killing every monster they can find. And you know, they may be okay. Well, we can circumvent this monster and get to the treasure. That adds to the layer of the game and makes for some interesting gameplay. It also goes to what you were talking about as far as helping to advance your players further. Well, if I want them to advance further, instead of just giving out extra XP, I can give the XP for gold. I can put a certain amount of gold out there for them. Now, the one thing that I do with this, and my players haven't seen this because they haven't made it back to town to actually spend any yet, is they won't get the XP for the gold they find until they spend the XP on training, essentially. Whether it's the wizard or I'm sorry, the magic user or the fighter or whatever, I would grant it to them as a group for spending it on buying a base of operations for their party and building it up with, you know, training rooms and extra equipment and hiring specialists and things like that. But also, if they just wanted to go, okay, well, I'm spending X amount on training for fighting, I will let them spend their gold on a one-for-one basis, which is another way of controlling how fast they move up through levels. That's pretty much it. I really enjoyed the first video. I enjoyed your videos. They were great. I love the way you did your examples for everything. That was really, really great. And I enjoyed everybody's feedback. I got a ton of feedback off of those with people's house rules, and that was fantastic. Way to go, guys and gals. And whatever. But anyway, that was pretty much it. I just wanted to address some things that I think maybe I didn't clarify what I meant well enough. But again, I digress. I'm just going to say, at the end of the day, they're house rules. They're the way you like to play the game. And just have fun playing the game. That's why we're all here, man. That's what we're doing. We're just having fun with our friends. So as long as you're doing that, you're doing it right. Till next time, good gaming and good luck.